Think about the last time you walked into a room and something felt different. Someone's eyes lingered a second too long. Their body turned slightly toward you, without them even noticing. You couldn't explain it in words, but your gut knew something was happening. That feeling wasn't random. That feeling was data. Your brain was reading signals your conscious mind hadn't even caught up to yet. Today, we're going to catch it up. Here's something most people don't realize. Attraction rarely announces itself with words first. Long before someone says "I like you," their body has usually already said it, in dozens of tiny, involuntary ways. The eyes, the posture, the distance between two people in a room, the timing of a laugh. These signals exist because attraction is not just a thought. It's a full body state, and full body states leak out, whether we intend them to or not. This matters more than most people give it credit for. We spend so much time obsessing over what to say to someone, crafting the perfect text, rehearsing the perfect opening line, and almost no time learning to read what's already being communicated without a single word. And yet, researchers who study human communication have consistently found that nonverbal signals carry an enormous amount of the meaning in any interaction, often far more than the actual words being spoken. Tone, posture, timing, distance. These things shape how a conversation feels long before either person consciously analyzes what was said. If you've ever left a conversation thinking, "I don't know what it was, but something felt off," or "something felt right," that feeling was built on exactly this kind of information. Today, we're going to make that invisible information visible. Let's start with the eyes, because the eyes are one of the most honest parts of the human body. Psychologists have long studied something called pupil dilation, the way the black center of the eye widens involuntarily when someone finds a person or a situation stimulating. This isn't something anyone can fake or control. It's an automatic nervous system response. When someone is genuinely drawn to you, their pupils may subtly widen while looking at you, even in a well-lit room where that widening shouldn't otherwise be happening. You probably won't consciously measure someone's pupils in conversation, and you don't need to. But this is exactly why prolonged, comfortable eye contact feels so charged. Something ancient in you is already picking up on it, long before your conscious mind puts a label on the feeling. Now let's talk about eye contact itself, beyond just pupils. There's a specific pattern worth knowing. Casual eye contact, the kind we use in ordinary conversation, tends to be brief, functional, mostly about exchanging information. Attraction-driven eye contact behaves differently. It lingers half a second longer than feels purely functional. It returns again after looking away, instead of moving on entirely. And often it comes paired with a flicker of a smile, even a small one, the corners of the mouth rising slightly before the person even realizes they're doing it. That combination, extended contact, returning gaze, involuntary smile, is one of the most reliable nonverbal signals we have for genuine interest. There's a particular version of this worth knowing about specifically, sometimes described as the triangular gaze. Watch where someone's eyes travel across your face during a conversation. In purely neutral, functional exchanges, eye contact tends to stay locked mostly on the eyes, moving back and forth briefly to check for understanding. In more intimate or attraction-driven exchanges, the gaze often traces a small triangle, moving briefly from one eye to the other eye, down to the mouth, and back again. This happens quickly, often within a second or two, and almost never gets consciously noticed by either person while it's happening. But if you slow down and actually watch for it, it's one of the more telling patterns available, because it reflects a kind of attention that pure information exchange simply doesn't require. It's also something worth mentioning about what happens when eye contact gets interrupted. Pay attention not just to whether someone makes eye contact, but to how they break it. A quick darting break, eyes snapping away and staying away, often signals discomfort or disinterest. A slow, almost reluctant break, where the eyes seem to pull away gradually, sometimes catching themselves drifting back moments later, tends to signal the opposite. The speed and quality of the break carries almost as much information as the eye contact itself. Let's move to the body as a whole, because the eyes are just the beginning of the story. Human beings orient their bodies toward what interests them. This is called postural orientation, and it happens completely outside conscious control most of the time. Watch someone's feet in a group conversation. Feet often point toward the person someone is most engaged with, even while their face is turned elsewhere, being polite to the rest of the group. The feet don't lie the way words sometimes do, because almost nobody consciously manages where their feet are pointing during a casual conversation. Torso orientation works the same way. Picture two people at a party, standing in a loose group of 5 or 6. If one person's chest and shoulders are angled toward a specific individual, even while their head turns to greet others, that's a meaningful signal. The body is choosing its primary focus, quietly, without asking permission from the conscious mind first. Now, here's something people find fascinating once they learn it: mirroring. When two people are genuinely connecting, their bodies often start to unconsciously match each other. One person leans forward, and moments later, the other leans forward too. One person picks up their drink, and shortly after, so does the other. One person crosses their legs a certain way, and the other, without noticing, adjusts to match. This mirroring happens because of something researchers call behavioral synchrony, a natural byproduct of feeling rapport with someone. It's not something people do on purpose. In fact, most people are stunned to learn they've been doing it at all when it's pointed out to them. If you want a quick test in a real conversation, subtly change your posture and watch, a few moments later, whether the other person adjusts to match you. If they do, repeatedly, across a conversation, that's rapport building in real time, right in front of you. It's worth noting that mirroring isn't limited to posture. It shows up in speech patterns too. Pay attention to pacing, the rhythm of how quickly someone talks and how long their pauses run. When rapport is building, two people's speech rhythms often start to sync up, almost like two instruments falling into the same tempo. One person speaks a little faster, energized by the exchange, and the other person's pace quietly speeds up too. This happens below conscious awareness almost every time, which is exactly what makes it such a trustworthy signal. It's very hard to fake unconscious synchrony on purpose, which means when you notice it happening naturally, it's usually telling you something true. Let's talk about proximity, because distance itself is a signal, maybe one of the most obvious ones once you know to look for it. Human beings are naturally protective of personal space. We instinctively keep more distance from people we're neutral or uncomfortable around. Traction shrinks that distance, gradually, often without either person consciously deciding to close the gap. Watch how close someone stands during a conversation compared to how they stand with others in the same setting. If the gap keeps shrinking over the course of an evening, especially if they're the one closing it, that's rarely accidental. There's a subtler version of this worth mentioning too, sometimes called micro-approach behavior. It's not a big, obvious step closer. It's smaller than that. A slight lean in during a good part of the conversation. A foot that shifts a few inches nearer. A body that angles just slightly more directly toward you than it was a few minutes earlier. These micro-adjustments accumulate over the course of a conversation, and if you compare where two people started standing to where they end up 20 minutes later, the distance traveled often tells a more honest story than anything either person said out loud. Touch matters here too, though it deserves to be understood carefully and respectfully. Light, brief touch, a hand on the arm during a laugh, a touch on the shoulder while making a point, is one of the clearest signals of comfort and interest a person can give without saying a word. What matters most isn't just that the touch happens, but how it's offered. Comfortable, casual touch, offered without hesitation, tends to signal ease and interest. Touch that feels sudden, one-sided, or repeated despite a lack of matching signals back is a completely different story. and deserves to be read as exactly what it is, a mismatch, not a promising sign. This is actually one of the most important points in this entire conversation, so I want to slow down here. Every single signal we've talked about only means something when it's part of a pattern and when it's mutual. One instance of eye contact means very little on its own. People make eye contact for all kinds of reasons that have nothing to do with attraction, curiosity, distraction, simple politeness. The signal only becomes meaningful when you see it clustered together with several other signals, repeated over time in both directions, not just coming from one person toward another. This matters because reading body language wrong in either direction causes real problems. Reading interest into signals that aren't there can lead someone to pursue a person who was never actually interested, which is uncomfortable for everyone involved. And missing real signals, because you talked yourself out of trusting your own instincts, can mean walking away from genuine mutual interest simply because you doubted what your gut had already picked up on accurately. The skill here isn't becoming paranoid about every glance and gesture. The skill is learning to notice patterns, clusters of signals, repeated over time, instead of overanalyzing any single moment in isolation. Let's talk about voice for a moment, because this one gets overlooked constantly. Attraction changes how people speak, not just how they move. When someone is genuinely engaged and drawn to another person, their speech often speeds up slightly, becomes more animated, and their vocal pitch may rise a little, especially in the early stages of a conversation that's going well. Laughter becomes more frequent, and often less tied directly to something being especially funny. People laugh, in these moments, partly as a social signal of enjoyment and comfort, not purely as a response to humor. If you notice someone laughing generously at things that weren't actually that funny, that's often less about your comedic timing and more about their comfort and interest in the pack interaction itself. Now here's something deeply human and slightly counterintuitive. Nervousness and attraction often look remarkably similar from the outside, and even from the inside. A racing heart, a dry mouth, fumbling over words. Both intense discomfort and intense attraction activate very similar physiological arousal responses in the body. This is part of why some of the most awkward, stammering conversations in early dating actually stem from real interest, not disinterest. The body doesn't always clearly distinguish between the excitement of attraction and the nervous energy of caring about someone's impression of you. If someone seems a little flustered around you, resist the instinct to read that automatically as disinterest or discomfort. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's someone caring more than they know how to show smoothly. This overlap runs deep enough that researchers have actually studied it directly, using it to explain why people sometimes misjudge their own feelings, not just other people's. Classic research on the psychology of emotion found that when people experience physical arousal without an obvious cause attached to it, racing heart, sweaty palms, shallow breathing, their mind often searches the surrounding environment for something to explain that arousal and sometimes lands on attraction as the explanation, even when the arousal actually came from something else entirely, like exercise, or stress, or simple nerves about the conversation itself. This tells you something important. Attraction isn't purely a fixed, objective thing happening independently inside someone's body. It's partly built out of how a person interprets their own physical state in the moment, which means context, setting, and timing all play a real role in how attraction gets expressed, even in how strongly it gets felt in the first place. I want to bring this back to something bigger than just decoding a crush, because that's not really the deepest value of learning any of this. What we're actually talking about is emotional attunement, the ability to notice what's happening beneath the surface of a conversation, instead of only responding to the words being spoken. This skill doesn't just help you figure out who's attracted to you, it helps you notice when a friend is struggling despite saying they're fine. It helps you notice when a colleague is uncomfortable despite nodding along in a meeting. It helps you notice more broadly that human communication was never just about words in the first place. Words are only the surface layer. Everything underneath is being communicated constantly, whether or not anyone's paying attention to it. I also want to be honest about the limits of all of this, because overconfidence here can backfire. Culture shapes body language significantly. What signals comfort and interest in one culture might mean something entirely different in another. Personal space norms, the acceptability of casual touch, even how much eye contact counts as polite versus intense, all vary meaningfully across different cultural backgrounds. A gesture that reads as flirtatious in one setting might simply be standard social warmth in pose in another, and assuming your own cultural default applies universally is one of the fastest ways to misread a situation entirely. Personality matters just as much. Naturally expressive people show bigger, more obvious signals, the kind that are easy to catch even from across a room. Naturally reserved people might feel exactly the same intensity of interest while showing power, far more subtle, restrained cues. A slightly longer glance instead of a wide smile, a small lean instead of an obvious step closer. This means the same list of signals will look completely different depending on who's displaying them, and learning someone's general baseline matters just as much as catching any one signal in isolation. There's no universal cheat code here, no single gesture that guarantees anything. What there is, instead, is a set of patterns worth noticing, held loosely, checked against the whole picture, and never treated as absolute proof of anything on their own. So here's what I want you to actually do with all of this. Next time you're in a conversation with someone you're curious about, don't stare them down trying to catch every micro-signal like a detective solving a case. That kind of hyper-analysis usually backfires, making you distracted and disconnected from the actual conversation happening in front of you. Instead, relax into the interaction and let yourself notice the overall feeling of it. Is the distance between you shrinking naturally over time? Is eye contact lingering and returning, instead of darting away quickly? Is their body oriented toward you even in a group? Are they mirroring your movements without seeming to notice they're doing it? You don't need to catalog every single cue individually. You just need to notice the overall shape of the pattern, the way you'd notice a song's melody without having to name every single note. And here's the deeper truth underneath all of this. The most reliable signal of all isn't any single gesture we've talked about today. It's ease. Genuine attraction tends to create a specific kind of comfortable energy between two people. An ease that shows up in how naturally the conversation flows, how quickly the silences stop feeling awkward, how much both people seem to be leaning into the interaction rather than performing through it. You can learn every single technical cue on this list and still miss the point if you count to that underlying sense of ease, because ease is the thing all this is individual signals are actually pointing toward in the first place. I want to leave you with this. Learning to read these signals isn't about gaining power over someone else. They're gaming your way into a relationship that wasn't going to happen naturally. It's about becoming more attuned, more present, more able to notice what's actually happening in a moment, instead of only what's being said out loud. That skill will serve you far beyond dating. It will change how you read friendships, how you read family conversations, how you read a room the moment you walk into it. Traction, at its core, is just one very visible example of a truth that applies everywhere. People are always communicating more than their words. Tell me in the comments. Have you ever caught yourself noticing one of these signals in real time before you consciously realized what was happening? Or have you ever missed one entirely, only realizing it looking back? I want to hear your stories, because the more we talk about this openly, the more we all get better at trusting what our instincts have probably been picking up on all along. This is gray smoke psychology. And if learning to read the signals beneath the surface of a conversation interests you, subscribe, because human behavior is full of signals just like these, quietly running underneath almost everything we say. We're going to keep decoding them, one video at a time,